Welcome to the Beau Show, the home of faith, family, and freedom. After the 15th vote, America finally has a new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. He officially replaces former Democrat House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in what will likely be a drastically different way of doing things as the 118th Congress begins this week. I want to devote today's show to the new sheriff in town, Kevin McCarthy, and why it took so many votes to accomplish this, and what we can expect to see from this new House leadership. For 2 years, we saw a Congress in which both chambers, the House and the Senate, as well as the presidency, were controlled by the Democrat Party. So they had their way on many, many issues, minus the occasional holdouts by Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. We saw that the filibuster would be preserved, which keeps certain checks and balances in our system. I want to talk about this shift in the pendulum and what we might expect in this new leadership. Kevin McCarthy is from a line of Irish immigrants and a firefighter's household. He has been the minority leader in the House in the previous Congress, and we have seen him be the GOP mouthpiece when it comes to opposing Democrat legislation. And just like the political pendulums swing in our nation, the occasion is now for him to lead the majority after the midterms, in which America voted in more Republican representatives than Democrats, although not by the margin many had surmised. The Senate actually held firm for the Democrats in a bit of a stunner to the GOP. This may create some gridlock with each chamber having different party leadership. So let's dip in and out of McCarthy's opening speech and analyze what is to come. McCarthy opened his remarks by saying the following.
That was easy, huh? I never thought we'd get up here. Thank you, Minority Leader Jeffries. Hakeem, I've got to warn you. 2 years ago, I got 100% of the vote from my conference.
This was a little bit of humor to get the ball rolling, but then McCarthy talked about both his background and the background of the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, in the following way.
You know, if a son of a fireman and a grandchild of immigrants can rise to the highest position in the most important legislative body in our country, and if my colleague, Hakeem Jeffries, with his life story, can rise to lead his party, then opportunity and democracy still thrive in America.
McCarthy strikes a unifying tone here, that if both of them, descendants of immigrants, can become leaders of the highest legislative body of the land, then American democracy is alive and well. It's what the founders of this country envisioned almost 250 years ago. The fact that these two men can do this and lead their respective parties is a remarkable thing indeed. He also addressed Leader Jeffries in establishing some ground rules about how their debates would go.
To Leader Jeffries, there will be times we agree, and many times we will differ. I promise our debates will be passionate, but they will never be personal. That's my commitment to you.
That's important because all too often we have seen attacks get quite personal. When Donald Trump became president, the Democrats waged an all-out war on him from the day that he was inaugurated. And in return, Trump returned fire. And it was personal from both camps. So McCarthy seems to be trying to restore a more policy-oriented debate. And then he addresses the American people.
As Speaker of the House, my ultimate responsibility is not to my party, my conference, or even our Congress. My responsibility, our responsibility, is to our country.
When Kevin Spacey played Democrat Majority Whip Frank Underwood in the Netflix political drama House of Cards, he shadowed Kevin McCarthy, who was the GOP whip at that time. Of the many great lines that Underwood spoke, this one was a direct quote from McCarthy.
Now, I'm going to say to you what I say to every congressman that sits where you're sitting now. Vote your district. Vote your conscience. Don't surprise me. And the most important one of those is don't surprise me.
Now, the show, of course, spiced up the delivery of this line since Underwood was ruthless, but it does hold true that whips have to be able to figuratively whip their members into place when it comes to votes. So McCarthy, as a previous whip and now speaker, seems to operate on a principled system of knowing where someone stands and not surprising him. When McCarthy continued his speech, the camera panned to his fellow Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. Let's take a look.
You voted for a new direction for our country. You embraced our commitment to America. And now we're going to keep our commitment to you.
Gaetz doesn't appear to be quite as enthusiastic as the rest of his party, and seems to have a discernible consternation, or perhaps even doubt, about the words coming out of McCarthy's mouth regarding a commitment to the American people. Gaetz was one of the 20 who presented a formidable opposition to McCarthy as Speaker, and even nominated Donald Trump for Speaker. It took a lot of backroom negotiations to get McCarthy over the hump, and we will get into some of those concessions and assurances. When he spoke about the rising cost of living and goods, and especially regarding the national debt, which no one really talks about anymore, watch the split of reactions.
That is why we commit to stop wasteful Washington spending, to lower the price of groceries, gas, cars, housing, and stop the rising national debt.
Not a single clap from the Democrats. Do they oppose lower living costs for Americans? Do they oppose reducing the national debt? It sure seems that way by their reaction. Why so silent? And McCarthy set the tone for the Congress by declaring what he wants to do first thing. Listen.
I know the night is late, but when we come back, our very first bill will repeal the funding for 87,000 new IRS.
Bold move. Repealing funding for 87,000 new IRS agents who would be targeting Americans. Let's face it, we don't need more bloated government. We need less of it. Why would Congress need more IRS agents and create 87,000 government jobs for an already simplified tax code rather than activating those jobs somewhere else that's not in the government? This is part and parcel of how Congress uses the power of the purse to make itself or its federal subsidiaries more powerful and bloated. And we've seen how that's played out in our other alphabet stew of agencies. It has resulted in hyperpartisanship and politicization. McCarthy made good on that promise and introduced the bill that will cut $72 billion with a B from the IRS on Monday night. McCarthy has a solution for forthcoming spending.
From now on, if a federal bureaucrat wants to spend it, they will come before us to defend it.
Seems fair to me. McCarthy also addressed the rising threat of the Chinese Communist Party, a phrase you don't hear often from the Democrats and Joe Biden, who was fine with TikTok.
As for the Chinese Communist Party, we will create a bipartisan select committee on China to investigate how to bring back the hundreds of thousands of jobs that went to China, and then we will win this economic competition.
We can also expect some new committees in the McCarthy era. No, not the Joe McCarthy, HUAC type committees of yesteryear, but some new ones.
Now, speaking of committees, we will hold the swamp accountable. From the withdrawal of Afghanistan, to the origins of COVID, and to the weaponization of the FBI.
Aha! So now we might finally be able to get to the bottom of COVID in China, rather than a year-long investigation into January 6th, or July 6th if you're Joe Biden, for which that committee dropped its subpoena of Trump. Another motion that generated thunderous applause from his party was this.
My friends, this chamber is now fully open for all Americans to visit.
I did see one Democrat clap, you can see that here, but the rest remained defiant that the Capitol would be reopening for the first time since COVID. Now this has a twofold message. One, that we are bigger than the virus and won't stay locked down forever. But also that the House will be open for people to witness what they debate. After all, it is the people's house.